Hello, friends. We're back with episode 172 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. If you're new to the show, this is the weekly podcast where we talk about the latest highlights and awesome additional resources that are shared every single week in this week's Our Weekly issue. My name is Eric Nance, and I'm delighted you join us wherever you are around the world. It's hard to believe July is almost over, but of course we got a lot more great R content to talk about with you today. And I never do this alone, as you know, so at the virtual hip right here on this split screen here is my co-host, Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Eric, at the virtual hip, only for a couple weeks until we get to see each other again in Seattle, maybe?
That's right, yeah, we're the countdown is on, so I got to get all my bits sorted out and hopefully get that talk ready to go, but all in good time. But yes, you might say the nerves are starting to hit in a little bit, but again, it'd be great to see you again and see all the wonderful peeps in data science and other sectors that frequent that conference every year.
Yes, I'm super excited as well. We have a ton of clients that are going to this conference this year, so I think it's going to be a big one. I'm almost surprised how many folks I know that are going to be there. So it's going to be a party.
Your party as well. Yeah, you're going to be high in demand, my friend. I hope they even get a few minutes of you after all that.
Stop it. Just a quick short story is last year when we were at Posit Conference, Eric and I met, and it wasn't 2 minutes after, we met, I guess for the first time in real life, that somebody came up and asked me to take a picture of you and them because you are the celebrity at this conference, certainly not me. So,
goodness.
Yeah, that was how it started.
That's how it always starts. Yeah, but I think the tables will turn this time around. But nonetheless, we're gonna have fun connecting with everybody, and yeah, we're gonna have a lot going on there. But we got a lot going on here, my friend, with the mic in our hands. So let's get going here. Our issue this week was curated by Rio Nakagawara, another one of our OG curators and longtime contributors to Our Weekly. And as always, he had tremendous help from our fellow Our Weekly team members and contributors like you all around the world with your pull requests and suggestions. As you may have heard in previous episodes, I admit the tease has been put over like a few months ago that I think who needs that like game development engine like Unreal or anything? We can use R to develop our games, and there is yet another milestone in this workflow here that we're going to talk about leading off this episode, and we are talking about the latest blog post from Matt Dre, who has been on this quest to leverage not only tooling that he's creating, but also augmenting some of the awesome tooling that's being created by Mike Chang, who you may also know as Cool But Useless on the social interwebs.
So probably the highlight of this blog post is that we know the full name of Mike FC, Cool But Useless, right?
You are correct, sir. This may be the first time we've ever seen that spelled out. So I guess the mystery's over.
I know. I apologize to Mike if he was trying to keep that from us because I think he did a pretty good job for a long time until this blog by Matt has come along.
Yeah, I liken this to, for those of you that follow pro wrestling, there are always those days in the 80s where you didn't know that Hulk Hogan is really named Terry Bollea until like you were much older. Maybe it's just one of those reveals, like the gimmick, the time's up for the gimmick. But nonetheless, we know who you are, Mike. Nonetheless, but yes, you've been hard at work on these packages. So what Matt talks about in this post here is that he has leveraged what Mike has created called the NARA package, which is basically supercharging R's ability to produce raster-based graphics, but tailor-made to things like pixel art. And what Matt has done is he's augmented the NARA package tooling with his previous package called Roguelike, which if you recall from a highlight episode probably 4 or 5 months ago, was a way in R to create these, in essence, randomly generated dungeon crawlers, all in text-based format. So you get a nice ASCII art of the dungeon with the layouts, and it would respond to your key presses to have you as the player with a little, maybe P symbol in the middle there, going up, down, left, right, and then the randomly generated enemies or other artifacts would move alongside you. So he's simply now merged the ability to do this, but now instead of the textual representation of those dungeons, he is augmenting some nice retro style looking sprites here. In fact, he's leveraging an open source framework from a user named Kenny. He has what's called a tiny asset pack of all these different sprite arts that are 16 by 16 pixels. So really, really nice. And if you ever played those RPGs of yesteryear, like say Dragon Warrior or Final Fantasy, yeah, these are going to look right at home in those artwork. So how does this actually work? Well, as I mentioned, there is a lot of the underpinnings have already been made by Matt in this roguelike package. But now, instead of the textual representation, he is mapping that mesh, which basically is a matrix of 16 by 16 or whatever dimension, where each cell has either a movable space or an obstacle, the player or the enemy. And so that's already randomly generated up the front, but then that is being translated into these tiles that are being created by the Nera package. So in the blog post, you see the textual structure of it, which again will look very similar to if you use Matt's roguelike package. But then that handoff is then translated, like I said, into this tile-based board. And now you see the nice image going under the matrix representation. It just looks literally picked out of a retro game. It really is absolutely amazing what's going on here. And you can do all sorts of things with this. Obviously, you can make this as big or small as you want, but there is a lot more that is coming in Matt's tooling here. He wants to make, really a true loop of the game, which if you played RPGs or roguelike dungeon crawlers in the past, you know that as you move along the board, you get a random encounter with an enemy, do the battle, win or lose, rinse and repeat. But of course, it's almost like an infinite loop per se. So he's looking at ways of having that true kind of gaming style loop in the back end here. And of course, like any RPG, you're going to have it after your inventory at some point, right? You got to have those weapons, those potions, those antidotes when you get poisoned or whatnot. So obviously, this is probably going to be a huge rabbit hole if they choose to go down this route. But I am very much eagerly watching this. But of course, the first major step is what the user actually sees. So what's seen here with this package that Matt's created, he now calls it tile-based. This is the start, folks. Like I said, who needs to pay for that Unreal Engine or that Unity engine? Boot up your R console and go to town, right, Mike?
Absolutely. And this, just reminds me of the old adage that R is only a programming language for statistical analysis, right, Eric? Can't do anything else well.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
And this also throws me back to, I think these graphics are like equivalent to at least, the Game Boy Color times of the world. This is reminding me of my Pokemon Blue game that I used to play on long car rides quite often.
Oh, yes.
I think the graphics are quite akin to that. It's pretty incredible that I think, as you mentioned, Eric, there's only like 4. They look like emojis, but I guess we're calling them these objects from a tiny asset pack, which is some resource out there that has all of these different 16 by 16 pixels that you can use. I imagine that they're like Creative Commons licensed or something like that, which is why Matt chose to use them and incorporate them. And this whole entire game, it looks like the graphics are just made from these 4 different emojis, if you want to call that, which is pretty incredible. The idea that, the things that we're looking forward to here in the next iterations of this potentially could be, as you mentioned, a true game loop, a way to have some sort of an inventory system. The sound generation is really cool to be able to have some sort of a soundtrack to this game as well. I think I've seen some more things from Mike FC coming out on Mastodon lately, if I'm not mistaken, around R packages that are doing some audio things. So maybe there's a potential chance that could get integrated into this package as well. But, it's hard to do this justice in audio form. You really have to check out the blog post, see the visuals that are there. install the package from GitHub yourself and try not to waste a couple hours going down, playing games in R. I dare you to try. And so this is really, really cool stuff. I think it's a fun way to start off the highlights this week, and I'm looking forward to what else is to come here.
Yeah, the creativity possibilities here are practically endless. And of course, as I'm watching this, I'm wondering, well, how would we be able to distribute this? Can you imagine a WebAssembly app that puts all this together? Good grief. I mean, I've seen, maybe I shouldn't say too much here on audio, but I'll say it anyway. There are, even on the Internet Archive, some of these WebAssembly powered, emulators of the classic arcade games that have long passed their IP windows, but it's all in your browser. It's like using native JavaScript to do it. Just imagine if, we've been watching the WebAssembly space quite a bit. I wouldn't put it past either me or someone else maybe working with Matt or Mike to throw their hand at this and see what happens, because just imagine how easily you could distribute something like this. Just mind-blowing possibilities here.
Absolutely. No, sort of reminds me of that the Shiny contest is back. I probably should have saved that for my additional highlight, but I saw that yesterday come across my social media feeds, but it sort of reminds me of that Absalon app, I believe, that was like the shark or underwater.
That's right, the Shark Attack app. Yeah, that was
maybe
awesome.
That could be hosted on WebAssembly. Ivan from my team has recently, published his first Shiny Live experimental app that's a card game. I think the gaming Shiny Live, crossover here is going to happen pretty soon.
It's not a matter of if, Mike. It's when.
Sounds like you found your next side project.
Speaking of trying things out, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that some of the biggest advancements in our world of tech have been the use of generative AI and large language models to help with all sorts of things in our daily lives, and especially in the world of software development. You've heard about efforts such as what Microsoft had piloted years ago with what's called Copilot, which if you opt into that in your IDE, such as Visual Studio Code, also there are plugins to this with, say, RStudio and whatnot, you'll get these, auto-completed like suggestions as you're typing out code. Maybe it's some boilerplate for a function call. Maybe it's helping flesh out some additional parameters or whatnot. Well, obviously this space is moving quite fast, and our next highlight today talks about some recent findings that have been explored by the Epiverse team on their explorations of what's called the Copilot Workspace initiative. So as I mentioned, this is coming from the Epiverse blog. It's got a set of authors here. We got Joshua Lambert, James Azam, Pratik Gupte, and Adam Kucharski. Hopefully I said those right. They have teamed up here to talk about, as they've been watching this space of how AI and LLM models are helping with development, what would be the situation of trying to leverage this new Copilot Workspace, which is kind of taking what was mentioned earlier by me in this Copilot initiative to the next level, and not just autocomplete code as you're typing, but actually take a set of requirements that are surfaced, say, via a GitHub issue, and just see how to actually produce the code or produce a solution to the problem at hand. So they decide, let's do an experiment here. They teamed up with a group of professors and their organization to do 3 different experiments with this Copilot Workspace to see how it works in the real world. The first experiment, and they try to go, I guess, from easy to difficult as we go through this, is say they have a function in their R package that has been internal up to this point, but maybe they got user feedback and says, hey, you know what? That's a useful function. Maybe we should export that. So using their EpiNow2 package, they looked at an existing issue that, again, was already filed about, hey, this function called EpiNow2 underscore CMD stand underscore model function should be exported. So they let the Copilot Workspace turn loose on this, and it did get the job done, albeit in ways that probably aren't as intuitive to an R user. So let me explain it bit by bit here. The Copilot Workspace did determine that, oh, you know what? we need to replace that keyword of internal in the roxygen documentation of that function and replace that with export, and also having to update the namespace. Now, there were some little shenanigans here because apparently it does change the formatting in one of their other function arguments, I guess doing some text tidying up, which again, yeah, that's fine and all. But in the end, it did technically get the job done. But this Copilot workspace is not intelligent enough to understand how documentation is updated with the modern R tooling for package development, such as using things like DevTools document or, more natively with roxygen 2 to re-update the namespace dynamically. It did it itself manually, like you would maybe in the early days of package development. So context itself, not quite there yet, but you can't say it didn't get the job done with this. It just did it in a much more manual fashion. So, so far, pretty promising. Let's take the difficulty up a notch, Mike, because now in the next experiment, they want to add a new model to the package, albeit not too difficult from a complexity perspective, but this is upping the ante into what the Copilot workspace can do. How did this one fare? What do you think?
Yeah, not quite as well, Eric. They wanted to add what's called a simple epidemic model to the R package that contains, a bunch of different models as well. So they, I believe, created a new issue, if I'm not mistaken, to add a basic SIR model, it's called, with a couple sentences on exactly what they were looking for. What happened was Copilot created a script, an R script, with a naming convention that followed the naming convention of the other modeling scripts that they had. So this one was, within the R directory, which was good. And the name of the script was model_SIR, which again, followed the naming conventions that they've used in this epidemics R package that they have right now. And I think this follows a lot of sort of the same things that I've seen, over and over again with Copilot, with ChatGPT, with some of this. It gets you close to the right answer and puts down, some of the right things that you would want there, but not in the way that you would necessarily want things organized, if you will. So the code that was generated, constructed that basic SIR model, used roxygen 2 as well to document the code, but a lot of aspects of the code, didn't match what they asked for in that issue. The code contained what they call some inadvisable coding practices in R, what we like to call code smells. And the model itself, followed the standard set of differential equations that are solved using the DE solve package, which is one that they had actually requested in their issue. But it didn't have any options to input, things that are really important to them, like interventions, which is, what the Copilot had suggested that it would actually include, but failed to do so. The other downside is that they used the require desolve. They used the require function to import the desolve package, in the body of the generated code. And as you know, Eric, when we are developing our packages, that's not something that you want to include in your function, right?
Yeah, the smell was strong with that one. Oh my goodness.
That one stinks to high heaven. And we use a lot of utility functions like from the dev tools and the use this package. If we want to leverage a new package within our R package, in a proper way, we could do, use this, use _package, desolve, right? And that'll add that to our description file. It might add it to the namespace where appropriate. And obviously we could, request the use of that package in our roxygen, right? Import from code decoration above that particular function. So that's a pretty bad one right there as well. A few different code smells here. I don't think that the function itself accomplished exactly what they were looking for that model to do, as well as, some of the kind of ugly best practice things. So we're starting to head a little bit in the wrong direction here as we get into experiment 3.
Yeah, and so talk about upping the ante a little bit, but yet something that is very relatable to every one of us that are developing, intricate code bases. They wanted to see if this Copilot workspace could actually do an intelligently driven code review of the package itself. As you know, as you get, maybe new features put in, bug fixes or whatnot, you get that point of eventual re-release, maybe an update you want to release on CRAN or whatnot. You want to have that code review to make sure that all the things are looking good. You're being efficient with memory usage, efficient with coding best practices. We always saw a little glimpse that, it may not be the best at coding practices. So what they are expecting to see is hopefully in this issue of asking it to do the code review, they would have a documented set with, links to particular snippets of code where maybe things could be optimized or maybe even just asking questions about the code or whatnot. Well, bad news is it didn't actually do any analysis of the code itself. It basically regurgitated some of the changes that were already described in the pull request and looking at change log, i.e. from the news file, and just kind of bundling all that together as a narrative, which in essence means that it does a great job of reading the news, that is. Not so much looking at the actual code, the changes that could be made to make the code better. So this is where, humans aren't being replaced on this one by a long shot. But what I do appreciate is, they gave this, 3, again, realistic use cases, and not all difficult, I would say. The first experiment is definitely the easiest one, and it did get the job done. Just not in the way of you as an R developer would carry that out. So I think the takeaway here is that as I agree with them in their takeaways here, there's a long ways to go. There are avenues of success here, but I think you as the end user definitely need to be vigilant on making sure that whatever prompts or requirements you're feeding into these are being accurately addressed in the results you get. And if you're getting code back, yes, you definitely should not take that blindly, so to speak. You need to make sure, does that fit your overall paradigm of a code base, your stylist, your style guides, if you will, your best practices for your team. Obviously, there's much more work to be done to make these, in my opinion, more dynamic so that as it looks at the code base for a package or maybe even a set of packages, that it can really grok, if you will, what are the key paradigms that are governing that code base, instead of relying on a whole bunch of additional sources of who knows where it gets it with respect to this effort. I think being intelligent enough about what's actually being done in the project is the way to go. For a research software engineering context, like what this is based on, yeah, maybe some help, but in the end, sometimes you just can't get away from doing some of this manually right now. But this space is moving fast. And again, I really appreciate their attention to detail to put it through the paces. But in the end, I'm not losing sleep over the fact that the AI bots are going to take over my package development anytime soon. What do you think?
Me neither, Eric. I'm trying to be open-minded about it, and I think as long as you have the expertise to be able to sniff out the good from the bad, running your code through Copilot for any of these purposes can still be useful, right? I'm not sure if I want it to actually physically make these changes to my code in any way, but maybe it's not such a bad thing for it to provide me with suggestions, right? There might be something, if I ask it to do a full-blown code review, there might be a little thing that it finds that I missed or somebody on our team missed because, programmatically pouring through the code, having a computer do that might be able to catch things easier than, we can catch with the naked eye, even looking at our code for a little while. So I think I'm open to suggestions, let me put it that way, from Copilot and from the ChatGPTs of the world, but I'm still in a place right now where I am going to often take those with a grain of salt and, leverage sort of my expertise over what's coming back from those types of models.
Yeah, one use case I'm seeing more of in many industries or many organizations is the process of maybe refactoring from like one type of code base to another, especially when you're shifting languages. A lot of companies are turning to LLMs and AI to help with that conversion. I've always had a little bit of spider senses tingling at this because with that new code, will it look like somebody with competent skills, and whether it's R, Python, JavaScript, or whatnot, will it look like they wrote it? Or is it going to look like a hodgepodge of tutorials that are found online and trying to do all, like you said, these mix mash of different coding styles and practices? So I think we're still a ways there, but I know that is a hot topic in many circles to see how fast it can get you to that next step. And there may be cases where it gets you really close and you just have to maybe another 10% of your time to revise it. There may be other cases where it just gives you absolute garbage and you might as well throw it away. So in any event, I think keeping an open mind and being realistic, I think are very important in these still early stages of this whole tech sector, of this whole industry. But I think good things are coming. Just got to use it responsibly, of course.
We'll see.
Rounding out our highlights today, speaking of refactoring things, you may have a situation where there are some things you could do manually, but then as you do it over and over again, especially as you're dealing with a large code base, maybe not even the one you wrote yourself, you wonder, there's got to be something that can help me get there even faster. So our last highlight today comes from a frequent contributor, Mael Salmon, from her recent blog about her recent journey to look at all the names of functions that are defined in a script or set of scripts, and a new approach that is new to her and frankly new to me as well. So this is fresh off the recent useR conference, where I'm seeing some of the videos of that come online, and it sounded like it was a terrific event. Of course, I have a little FOMO every time I see that because I still haven't been to a useR yet, but someday that will be checked off the bucket list. It just wasn't able to this year. But one of the talks that Mael discovered that she didn't see live, but she heard about after the fact, is Davis Vaughn from the Posit team talked about a framework called treesitter. What treesitter actually is a mechanism to parse code for somewhat like what we've heard in the past with things like abstract syntax trees and trying to parse either variable names, function names, or whatnot. Apparently, treesitter is a C library, and I guess maybe other libraries as well, to help with that mechanism of parsing, code intelligently. So her use case was the following: is that she wanted to help out finding functions in the package iGraph. And if you know what iGraph is, it's kind of like the standard bearer of doing network data representation, which you can turn into network diagrams, very much like tree setups or very intricate networks. iGraph has a long history. We've covered it before on the show, and it is a massive code base. So she wanted to have a use case of, okay, what functions in iGraph? Now, there is a certain operator that iGraph has that's like a bracket or square operator. She wanted to see how many functions we're only using within this special operator. So she had to literally go within this operator function and find all the utility functions throughout. The example she has in the post only has a couple of them just for kicks, but imagine there's like a whole bunch of them. And she wanted to be able to, she had to refactor these, but she wanted to, or at least get to the point of refactoring them. And she didn't want to manually copy paste all these function names or discover them. So she has used things like XML parse data in the past. We've covered on a previous episode of her explorations with that to parse a complicated function. She wanted to see what it would look like with treesitter to do that similar operation. So she talks about her use case here. She loads the package, and then she loads the parser for the R language in that, reads in that function text or that script that has the function text. And then she wanted to figure out, okay, where is the root of that tree that is now going to govern all the child nodes of that function? So this gets a little in the weeds here, but there is a function in treesitter called query that you can feed in kind of a snippet of code that you want it to look for. And there is like a little kind of YAML-like structure to it. You define what's on the left side, what's on the right side, and you give it kind of like the plain text like label of that, wherever it's an identifier, a definition, and then you kind of give it looks like a regex kind of comparison about what you want to match it to. This is all news to me. I've never seen the treesitter syntax before. But sure enough, when you run that, and then you get a nested list back in R that gives you the text of what it found versus the actual text itself, the expression that's kind of more translated to the treesitter notation of it. And then you got a step of the way there. She didn't find the children functions yet. But guess what? There's more. It's almost like you have to do a nested query to get to that point. You then do the similar kind of syntax. You're looking at the left side and the right side definitions, finding another query of the previous query, and then she was able to find the names of these different functions, again, internal functions that are in this square operator. And it's a huge list after that point. But then through some grepping of that, she was able to get all of those hidden function names in that square operator. There's about 5 or 6 of these intact, but this did this all programmatically. She didn't have to look at all this herself. So you can imagine if you scale this up to like 100 times this size with a huge R package, this might be a great way to kind of do this kind of like unique query language with treesitter to get to what you need. Admittedly, I have never even ventured near these rabbit holes before, but I could see for a legacy code base, and again, I stress maybe one that you yourself didn't write as you're getting familiar with it, because I've looked at iGraph before, and yeah, there's a lot going on under the hood on that one, so I wouldn't know where to look with trying to pick out these internal functions. Looks like treesitter is something to take a look at. And fun fact about treesitter that I discovered after briefly looking at Davis's talk, this is being incorporated directly into Posit's new IDE Positron as part of its base for when you look at, say, the outline view of a script and getting those function definitions, which we've seen in RStudio as well. But now I believe treesitter is doing the heavy lifting to grab all those contexts around those functions. So it looks like treesitter is here to stay for sure. But what an interesting use case here that I'll have to take a note of if I have to deal with legacy code-based discovery in the future.
Yeah, Eric, I feel like Mel always brings us some pretty interesting use cases on the highlights. This is actually quite similar to a blog post that she authored a little while back where she did something very similar, but in XML instead, using an XML parsed data R package, I believe. So this is, if you want to take a look at that blog post and this one side by side, I think it'll give you 2 different approaches to essentially doing the same thing. And it looks like there's about 5 or 6 different functions from the treesitter package that Mael is really leveraging here. And she does note that she went through a lot of different emotions as a beginner to this treesitter package, and not all of them were positive. One of them that I must have imagined taking a lot of tinkering with is where she does define that sort of string that she's looking to parse, which involves, as you said, this regular expression type of notation that we're looking at to try to call out sort of the particular function definitions that we're interested in here, and being able to return that as a list that is parsable. And so I think sort of the chief different functions that she's employing from treesitter after she does that are the query captures, and then this node text, which I think sort of turn this list that gets returned into something that's a little more easily parsable, if you will, within R. And obviously, at some point in here, we're leveraging per, because we are outputting a list, the map character function, to be able to break things down into just this final, simple handful of 6 different names of functions that she's interested in. There is one footnote in this blog post. It says, "No, I have not installed Positron yet." So Mael is doing this all from the RStudio IDE. at this point. Yeah, but it's interesting to hear that treesitter is obviously gaining some ground. I'm not sure how new in and of itself the treesitter C utility is, but it's something that we're new to seeing, I think, in the R ecosystem, as there's recently been some other blog posts, as you mentioned, that the folks at Positron are using it as well. So it's very interesting to me. Obviously, I could see if we have some large code bases where you have to do some sort of profiling of that code base, or extracting of particular portions of that code in a way that just really isn't useful to do manually, the old copy and paste method, and it makes more sense to do that programmatically. Grateful to the fact that Mael has now given us 2 different ways to go about doing that.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this treesitter repo, and we'll put this in the show notes if you haven't heard of this before. Like, we didn't hear about this before. It looks like a pretty mature project with a lot of modern bindings nonetheless, and they're trying to be dependency free to start. But then if you want to hook it into Rust, guess what? You can. Want to hook it into WASM or WebAssembly? Yes, you can. Even has its own CLI to boot. So there is a lot going on under the hood with this, and the best part is you can use this from wherever you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be in Positron, as you said. This could be in any R session. You can boot this on VS Code or whatnot. So again, what I appreciate is being able to learn about these discoveries, but then to be able to use this in my preferred environment. So this will be great. Again, I think to try out with a low friction way to get started. And there is an R package now that has been authored. We'll put a link to the R package itself in the show notes that ties all this together. But yeah, I guess you'll never look at your code the same way again when you're looking in the forest, getting the forest from the trees or whatever it says.
Exactly. No, that's a good tree-related pun here.
Yeah, I know. I try. But hopefully you don't get lost in is the rest of this R Wiki issue, because there's a lot of great content here. But as always, we put these in nice sections for you to digest, whether it's new insights, uses in the real world, package updates, tutorials or whatnot. There's always something for everybody here. So we'll take a couple minutes for our additional finds before we close out here. And for me, a reality in my industry, and I'm sure many others as well, as you're building enterprise apps, maybe those that don't necessarily go outside the firewall, so to speak, but yet you have leadership, stakeholders that are asking, hey, you built this great tool. What's been the user adoption? Where are areas that people are spending their time in the most? Not always questions I really want to have to answer, but if I do have to answer, I want to make it as easy as possible for me to get those metrics. And that's where Epsilon has pushed a major update to their shiny.telemetry package. Version 0.3 comes in with a lot of great updates here, including some very nice quality of life improvements, like actually checking whether it's an authenticated based app to get the user ID, if you will, of that session, which can be great as you're looking at different usage patterns and whatnot, and to be more transparent about what you actually want to track. Because if you don't want to track all the inputs in your app, you want to be able to way to exclude them, but not have to exclude them name by name. You can now do a regex if you have all your inputs named with a certain prefix in front or whatnot that you don't want to include in. You can throw a regex that way too. Other enhancements include actually tracking the errors that can occur in your app. And boy, that can be very helpful for diagnostics. Not that I would ever have an app that crashes, wink, wink. But also, if you want to take advantage of an unstructured database to put these metrics in, or these usage patterns in, they now have support for MongoDB, which of course is very popular for unstructured nested type data representation. So lots more under the hood with that, but they also have updated their package documentation with 3 different vignettes, all about the different use cases that you can have for Shiny Telemetry. So really kudos to them. Looks like a great package. And yep, this is something I deal with every single day. I roll a new app out, so I'll be keeping a close eye on this.
Me as well, Eric. That sounds really, really exciting. It's something that a lot of our clients are always asking for, right? You finally get over the hump and build your beautiful app and deploy it out to the world. And then almost immediately we get the question, can we get some user metrics on this app as well? So I'm excited to check out those new enhancements. An additional find that I saw in the highlights this week are from Dr. Sophie Lee, who's the founder and director of S Cubed, a statistician and educator. Now has a 2-day introduction to R with the Tidyverse course. It looks fantastic. I'm seeing some really, really nice visuals here on this website, which I believe are probably borrowed from who's the person in the R ecosystem. I think she may work for Observable now. Is it Allison Horst?
Allison Horst
that used to make the really nice R types of graphics and imagery. So I see one of those here, and that just tells me all I need to know, that this is going to be a fantastic 2-day training here from September 24th to September 26th. So if that's something that you're interested in, or somebody on your team might be interested in, it's going to cover everything from R to R Studio, data management, visualization in ggplot and EDA, and then some best practices for doing reproducible research. So I think we cover a lot of in the weeds things sometimes on the highlights, and I want to make sure that we don't forget about those particularly new or trying to learn about R. So this might be a good opportunity to try to make that jump, if that sounds like you.
Yeah, fantastic resource here. I'm looking at it. It's definitely a Quarto-based site, and the styling's fantastic, easy to navigate. So yeah, kudos to her and the team. This looks like a fantastic thing to highlight here, and thanks for calling that out. And boy, we love to call everything out, but yeah, there's only so much time in a day, folks. But again, that's why we put this link in the show notes. All the highlights you've heard us talk about today, and those additional resources are all in the show notes, and also at rweekly.org. It's the easiest place to bookmark to find all these terrific content and the back catalog of issues as well. And so if you want to help the project, the best way to help is to share those new resources you found, wherever you created them or someone in the community has created them. It's just a pull request away, all marked down all the time. There's a link in the upper right corner. That fancy little octagon cat, whatever you call it, is in the upper right corner. Just click that, taken directly to GitHub pull request. You don't need an AI bot to fill this out. It is all marked down all the time. Very easy to get started quickly. We have an issue template to get you up and running quite quickly as well. And if you want to get a hold of us, we have a few ways to do that. We have a contact page directly in this episode's show notes. We are on all the major podcast providers, so you should be able to find us from wherever your favorite preferred listening preference is. And also, you can get a hold of us on these social medias as well. I am at our podcast at podcastindex.social on the Mastodon servers. I am on the Weapon X thingy sometimes with at the Rcast, and mostly on LinkedIn as well. Search my name, you will find me there. And Mike, where can the listeners get a hold of you?
Yep, you can find me on Mastodon at Mike_Thomas at fosstodon.org. Or you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK. Or you can find me in Seattle in a couple weeks. Shoot me a message if you're going to be there, and would love to chat all things R.
Likewise, yeah. Like I said, the time is coming close, so yeah. I'm not packing just yet, but that's not too far away, to be honest. And I always bring some tech gadgets too. Who knows? I might bring a couple mics with me. I'm just saying. We'll find out. But nonetheless, we're going to close up shop here for this episode of our Weekly Highlights. We thank you so much again for listening to our humble little banter here, and we will see you back here for another episode of our Weekly Highlights next week.